She can't make it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Actually, I have a copy too, because I'm frankly questioning whether Jim's citation is the best one for this. So I was hoping he'd show up early so I could talk to him, but there's some nuisance regulations as well, nuisance laws as well, which frankly I'm kind of under the impression works better. But I'm hoping to talk to Jim about that. Here you go, Shelley. Who's the proponent for 7 Uplands Road?
Jonathan Lockett.
Here's the agenda, Shelley. I'm missing it here.
Yeah, I don't have one.
Oh. Did everybody get the DEP letter to Halloran?
I did, yes.
The DEP letter, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. You get this one?
I think I do. This one?
Okay, I got an extra copy. All right.
There's been a lot of activity on 370, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, once we get into it, you'll have to give me a quick dissertation.
I'll give an update for everybody on kind of the history and what's happened recently, and we've got kind of 3 avenues here, so.
That's good, no problem there. Systems fail, there's something for people. Thanks, honey. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the one I got.
Okay, let's,
I think you started.
It's on.
okay, we started, okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the May 24th, 2016 Littleton Board of Health. Shelley, we have any administrative stuff we've got to deal with?
No, I just have a couple bills to be paid.
Okay. Board member reports, anybody?
Well, I'd just like to, I was hoping to welcome Jen, but she's not here. But one of the things that we generally do when we reorganize after an election, I kind of think for myself, I don't know how Jennifer would feel, I'd like to kind of wait a couple times, to see how the board interacts and before I'd make any suggestion on who should be chairman. So in other words, have you stay in place for at least a couple more meetings anyways.
All right, as long as it doesn't go too long.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I really don't know much. I hadn't watched any TV or anything, so I don't know.
I understand what you're saying, but the question is, 2 people left.
I
He being
know.
the chairman, and Bill was supposed to be a vice chairman, become a chairman, so I come to the new guy. Me, I was a chairman before, and I was recommending John to become a vice chairman. You be the clerk, and the young lady will be the newcomer.
Well, I
That's
think,
how it happened when I was in the beginning. It went all the way around, so
well, I'm
I don't
not
think there is any reason to go any longer.
The thing is, Gino, you lost 2 members, right? So you really almost got not a whole turnover, but you got. But for my sake, I want to see how the board interacts, and because I guess there's quite a few issues, and that's my own feeling. And I don't know how these guys feel.
So we have a lot on the agenda tonight, as this appears like it's going to have some discussion. Why don't we put it off at least one more meeting? I think Peter would feel more comfortable.
All right.
I do think, everybody who comes to the chair brings some strengths and weaknesses. I do believe that we should rotate annually. We don't get
Oh, I
any
think
kings
so.
that way. We don't get you don't maximize anybody's weaknesses, and I'm certainly.
Well, the thing is, there's a lot of work. I mean, generally they say like the chairman is basically he sets the agenda and conducts the meetings, but you're getting all the phone calls. You got to go to financial.
Yeah.
Meet with the
And
finance.
there's a couple
committee.
things that are coming up that I'd like to
Yeah.
finish, one of which I'll talk about a little bit in the board member reports, but I've got a meeting with DEP Thursday morning, unless you want to go to that one, Gina. I'd love to send you to that one.
Me and Peter went many times.
Let's put it off for a meeting or two
Yeah,
and
all right.
take it up again, but I think it's a stronger board when we rotate chairs with some frequency, so. All right. Any other board member reports, Gino?
Well, I know the problem we've been having with mosquito company and everything, and they like to have something done in the town, but it costs so much money. And a gentleman came, and he worked for a company, and he knocked on my door, and he says, did you call for a spray? I said, no, but the lady across the street did, because two daughters graduated from college, so they wanted to have a spray, so the mosquito won't. And I said, why don't you give me one of these here? It's not this one, but I have it at home. And I will mention to the board, so that you can come in front of the board. Maybe the town will be able to afford only a part of it instead of to do the whole thing. You know what I mean? The other company don't like to do a part of it. They want to do the whole thing. So if he comes in front of us, we can give him a suggestion.
So the issue is, what we've talked about, the real concern with the Central Mass mosquito was
Right.
the main public health benefit they have is their surveillance program. Come on in, have a seat. Hi, please have a seat. We're in the middle of a meeting, so. So
Let 'em
the
write.
main benefit of the Central Mass mosquito control is they do, for public health purposes,
Right.
is that they do surveillance, Gina.
Right.
That wouldn't be something that we could privatize out, because they
I
have a
understand
relationship with the Mass
Right.
Department of Public Health.
Right. But we can,
I'm not, let me back up a bit. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Gino. Is this another company other than the one that we
yeah,
generally
it will
have
not
to do the-
interfere, it will not interfere with the company, period. As the question, so the town will, because of the town, we are against to spend all that kind of money.
No, we weren't against.
Well,
So
in
for
the,
his background, what happened is Central Mass Mosquito Control came to us with their annual budget. It was very, very scant on actual
very
information.
expensive.
We were asked to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. We had long discussion. I drafted a letter to the Board of Selectmen that said, from a public health perspective, surveillance is really the only direct public health benefit here. We then sent it to the Board of Selectmen. They knew it was public health versus nuisance control and had our perspective so they could make a decision. I'm not sure, I assume they went on and funded them, because I
I
saw.
thought that was under our budget, though.
No, it's cherry sheets, it goes.
Cherry sheets.
You know, it's
Okay.
cherry sheet, so they do it, so, but we were asked to make a recommendation. What we didn't want to do was, they gave very little information from the mosquito project. And we wanted to make clear what we thought had public health significance and what we didn't. Beyond that, whether they chose to do it was a Board of Selectmen issue.
Right.
So, Gino, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the town or the board supporting a private company doing
No,
mosquito
no,
control.
we don't have to support anybody, just let him come, and he might be able to explain something that we don't know.
But
I mean,
that's the
at least-
same,
Is this Central Mass or is this somebody else?
I don't, he had a pickup truck, so I can't
what's
tell
it
you what
say
the
on your
company.
brochure?
Well, I have it, this is not a brochure,
Okay.
I have it home.
Bring it at the next meeting and we'll discuss it then,
Right,
Gino.
well, I'll bring it in and we can discuss it, we can discuss it later.
All right. Any other board member reports, John?
None for me.
Okay, the only thing I'd like, a brief update on Taylor Street. We continue to work with the Attorney General's office.
Taylor Street, what address? Ernest's?
Yes, Ernestie's property. Basically, for his background, the board condemned that property. We had actually put a motion to ask for it to be demolished because it had been several years and nothing had happened. The Finance Committee and our town administrator nixed that because there would be basically a gap between, and he didn't have the money, so we were going to do it and put a lien on the property, but there would be a certain period of time where if it changed hands, we ran the risk of not recouping that money, which is, estimate was about $65,000. So Finance Committee and Keith nixed that.
Well, the bank owns that, correct?
Technically, no, he owns it. We've been through this. So he still technically owns it. The bank has, long story, the bank doesn't own it. He does legally. Since that didn't work, I found a program with the Attorney General's office. What's it called again? Abandoned Property Initiative, where essentially town applies on behalf of this. The Attorney General goes to the court. They identify the issues that need to be fixed or brought up to code. They bring the property owner in, and basically, if he can't afford it, they put it into receivership. There are a list of contractors who come and basically put the work to bring it into code. They're guaranteed to be paid. The building owner then has a period of time, plus a small percentage on top of the cost. The building owner then has a period of time which to pay him. If he doesn't, it goes up for auction. So we explored this program. We went to court once, and that very question of who owned the property came up. It didn't proceed at that time because it wasn't clear whether Mr. Ernest still owned it or the bank did. Long story short, the judge sent the AG's office back. They've done that research. Mr. Ernest owns the property. Since his son and daughter have gotten power of attorney, They're exploring tearing it down themselves. We said we're open to that, but we want to see the financial resources that you can do that, including cleanup of the property afterwards. They have till, I think, June 1st to do that, in which case, if they don't show that ability by June 1st, we move forward with the receivership program with the Attorney General's office. And we go to court, and now we do know who the legal owner is, Mr. Hennessy, and the court can consider that and act appropriately. So that's where we are with that.
Thanks.
And where are we with the discussion of at least putting temporary fence or fencing up around the property?
So we had put a motion, and Bill was a little hot over this, that we didn't act on it as far as fencing off the property. Frankly, I didn't follow up on it when I found out Mr. Ernestine was the owner,
Still the
because I have some
owner, yeah.
questions whether he has the resources to do that.
Right.
We can follow up with a letter, but I think,
Well, I guess if his son and daughter are,
right. And I think we're venturing into area where it's not on the agenda. We probably shouldn't go into much detail on that. That might be a better agenda item.
Okay.
So that's a brief update on that one. Anything else?
that's it?
Do we have any minutes? No? Okay, next meeting is hearing 7 Upland Road, Mr. Markey.
Evening.
Here's trouble.
Jonathan Markey with Markey and Rubin. Have a set of plans for you here. Pass these ones down to Peter.
Thank you. See if I remember how to read them.
Meanwhile,
Variance is down in the corner. The important part here.
See, I got this upside down.
So we did, we're doing a repair for 7 Uplands Drive, which, Uplands Road, which the property is kind of funky shaped here. So this is Uplands Road on the left-hand side of the paper. And this back property line that you see, the stone wall, this is the cemetery.
So you can see.
Sure.
So it's this kind of angled dogleg right, if you would, property. And the existing septic system is located way down the hill from the house. So you see this long sewer line that goes all the way down to the existing field. So we did some soil testing. We found soils consistent with which were the original previous design. It's sand, 2 minutes an inch. Water table isn't too bad. However, it does require us to be raising up the system. So tonight I'm asking for a groundwater offset variance due to the fact that in order to construct this system, to bring in that extra foot of sand will be extremely costly. There is no access to this area down here except for up near the driveway. If you look right off the driveway, there's that 3-to-1 slope that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 feet high. We can't bring trucks down that hill. So all of the material for this new system has to be stockpiled at the end of the driveway, picked up with a skid steer and driven, not a quarter mile, but a very long distance down to the system and installed. So, so I'm asking for the groundwater offset variance. Oh, we also approached the cemetery to ask if possibly we could use the roads within there to bring in, 10-wheelers, not triaxles, of sand. And they said, no, you'll end up destroying our roads. So that wasn't, it was an option, we thought, but it's not available to us. So this really is needed for the construction of this system. Back when they installed this system, it was part of the subdivision. They were able to come through the other lots. They built all 3 of these systems, this lot, the next one, and the next one. all three systems go right in a row. So they had constructed them all at the same time. Now there's no access to them.
Is this all trees down there, or is that all?
No, it's all open area. They had the foresight of thinking this may happen, so everything was already cleared, and the amount of fill required for the top of the system is already installed. So it's really just digging through the fill, adding the new sand, and constructing the new system.
What is the system?
I think it was 84, 82?
Yeah, it's about when they went in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
letter says 85.
85, okay.
Well, Jim didn't have a problem with it. I read his notes.
Seems like an improvement where,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, there's an offset to groundwater, but it's better than the one that's with the system we have now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's not in a water resource or anything,
Nope.
so you don't have that
it's
issue.
in town water, so.
Yep. Yeah, from 5 to 4, yeah.
I don't have any questions or comments.
No, I'm all set.
Dino, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we accept the variance of reduction of 5 feet to 4 feet to the groundwater for 7 uplands.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Great, appreciate it. Did you prep the permit for this one? He did. Thank you. Thank you.
Kelly, you want to come to the hall? We're about to start on this topic.
So there's copies of the logs that we've been keeping of everybody's things, if anybody wants them, and the letter that DEP sent, and Jim's comments, if anybody wants them, they can grab them.
All right, have a good night. Appreciate it.
Good night.
You're still coming across the border, are you, Jonathan?
I am. Heading back right now.
Okay.
Shelley, these are for, those are the permit drawings.
Okay,
Yeah, Shelley, do we have a sign-in sheet for this one as
yeah,
well?
it's going in.
Good.
Yeah.
Hello.
Fine. You can sit in the audience for now. We're not calling people up yet.
Oh, okay.
She can sit up here if she wants.
I'll sit back here. I don't have a sign. so-
Well, we have a couple parties on this one, so we've got some stuff to go over before we bring people up. Okay, so we'd like to begin the discussion on 370 Harwood Ave. We usually run a pretty informal meeting here, but given the number of people and frankly some of the emotions, I think it's going to be, everybody's going to have a chance to speak, but we're going to run a little bit more formally than we typically do on these things. So what I'd like to do is give a little bit of background on this and talk about some of the recent things we've been doing and why, and kind of explain it. So I think this site's been in process. I've only been on the board for 2 years. There have been complaints since I came here, and I believe before, about this compost site from the neighbors. Predating my time on the board, I know Jim and the board worked on it where, you know, at one point the odors, the board took action and Jim took action to basically preclude grass clippings from being brought onto the operation, because grass clippings typically have a very high odor associated with them. We had hoped that that would take care of some of the problems. I'm not sure the order of this. At one point, because there were grass clippings in there as well, there was a berm along the outer edge of the property that we asked Mr. Halloran not to, and Vinnie not to disturb and to leave in place to order some privacy and some noise and some basically a barrier to the abutters. So that went into place. We were still receiving complaints at different points of the year. At one point, Ann Laurie, who was chair at the time, began investigating. She was convinced for a short time that it was the local wetlands that were causing the odors. There may have been some instance of that, but it became pretty clear last spring or late last winter that there was really something going on more than the wetlands, and that the grass clipping ban and the berm hadn't addressed So at that time, what we had received were a lot of sporadic complaints. Often we get a complaint, said it really smelled bad 3 days ago, and it's very hard to confirm that and document it. So we started a reporting system, which we asked the neighbors to participate in via email, and to basically send us reports of when there was an odor, kind of the intensity of the odor, what the conditions were. At the same time, we asked Mr. Halloran to log in his activities, so we could maybe associate certain activities, whether it be screening or breaking into new piles that might be associated with those odors, with the potential hope that we could maybe mitigate the odors. So we went through probably 2 periods where we got a fair amount of reports in the fall. Last fall, when they were dropping off leaves, we got odor reports. A number of us went out there, Jim, myself, I think everybody at the table here who was on the board at the time. And there were some odors, largely the smell of leaves, fairly intense at some point, but it was largely the smell of leaves. Couple times it seemed like the odors were something else. I remember smelling a turpentine odor. We really couldn't get to the root of that one. We thought maybe the leaves had been partially composted when they got brought in. In discussion with some of the other members and Jim, it seemed like it was annoying, but it maybe didn't hit the level of a nuisance. So we continued to watch it. I think there were odors during the winter. I don't think we got too many complaints during the winter, but we really started to get an uptick in complaints, both in the frequency, the duration, and the intensity of the odors this past spring, continuing through the present time. As early as I think yesterday, we were getting complaints. As you see, there's a log in front of you. It shows who complained, kind of what the levels were, that sort of thing. The board members went out in, and I think in speaking with some of the board members and Jim and myself, and that's for discussion with everybody here, the odors really, the frequency, duration, and intensity really did hit as kind of a consensus and nuisance level, much more than an annoyance level. So 3 things have sort of been going in discussion and ongoing that might help mitigate this one. The first one is DEP, and there's a little bit of background. DEP permits this compost site, not the Board of Health. So we've had DEP out there at least 3 times since I've been on the board. I was present for 2 of those. One I wasn't. About a year ago, Jim had Sumner Martinson out there who ran the program because there was a concern about the proximity of the wells to the composting operation, and the DEP regulations basically said compost operation has to be at least 250 feet from the wells. At the time, the DEP person said, well, you can't really measure it. It looks 250 feet to me, and we didn't, frankly, have much luck with that. The other time we did, both in the time I was there and that time, we did ask them for an analysis of whether they felt like the composting was being conducted properly. They felt that it was. In my experience, I felt that it was. Jim's experience, we felt that it was. The issue continued with the wells, and the odors came, and some of you can contact the DEP, which probably helped in this as well. Or we had DEP again out last Thursday. It was a new person. We pointed out the wells to him, and he said, yes, there is stuff going on within 250 feet of those wells. And he basically wrote a letter. I don't think you've gotten it yet because you don't have email. I think, Vinnie, you've gotten it. There's a copy of it here that basically gives Mr. Halloran 21 days to get a surveyor on and survey out what the perimeter of that 250 feet is. He's going to have to operate on the outside of that perimeter. I did follow up today with an email to DEP because they CC'd me on that letter and said, well, you know, when after he identifies this, will he have to start working on that perimeter? I think realistically there's going to have to be a few days, but they basically say they're verbal, followed up by a written. So within a month, I suspect Mr. Halloran will be working. He needs to be given time to move the piles and that sort of thing to be reasonable, but he'll be working on that perimeter. Richard, how far in? I mean, we kind of eyeballed it, but I'm thinking it's at least 50 to 75 feet in from where you're working now in some portions.
Yes, right around there.
Kind of the new line of operations would be parallel to Colonial Way. We're not sure what it would be from Richard, what's a Richard Circle? Richard Way. Colonial Drive and Richard Way. But I think, so there were 3 wells, we don't know the exact, but it would move that operation back from the neighbors, at least along Colonial Drive, and I'm not sure where the well is on that building that you own, the rental building.
Yes,
So that'll be answered when we have.
Brad, could I
Yep.
just ask, on the 250 feet, is that from the perimeter of his land, or is it from the pile itself?
From the well to where he operates.
But is it to the pile? I mean, he's operating that whole area.
Right, well, we talked about that, and DEP basically said to the edge of that perimeter berm, and that's something I'd like to discuss with the neighbors. I personally would like to see the berm stay in place, but move it, the line of operation, which means no compost, no vehicles, no nothing within 250 feet of those wells, but I think it would be in everybody's best interest to keep that perimeter berm in place. And we'll have some of the discussion here on that tonight if that's the direction we go. So that will move that in. I don't know if it's likely to shrink the size of the operation. It would seem like it would, which may mitigate some odors as well. On top of that, there were some other requirements that DEP had that I think had been submitted originally, but maybe hadn't been, DEP didn't have them on file. One of which is an odor control plan, which is a condition of that permit. DEP is going to require that. There's also some reporting, which frankly I don't think is terribly relevant to this. But that 250-foot setback from the wellheads and the odor control plan are something that DEP is looking at. We have a copy of the letter there. So that's one front on this. The other question I have, and I'll ask the board at some point tonight, is whether this is properly zoned for this. We're not the zoning board. I believe it's zoned residential. I don't believe that as it stands now, Mr. Halloran meets there's zoning exemptions under Mass General Law 48, Section 3 for farms, which would include this. I don't believe Mr. Halloran meets that definition. That's for the zoning board or Roland, the zoning officer, to determine. But I would like this board to basically say, we'd like some clarity on this for the neighbors, whether this is properly zoned. Because frankly, the problem here is it's not a badly run operation. I don't think anybody's being negligent. We have very close proximity to a compost operation, and neighbors. Zoning is typically how those things are handled. So that needs clarity from the ZBA. The third thing that we need to discuss, and I think is the primary focus of tonight's meeting, is we have some authority. Jim has cited some laws and regulations. I actually prefer a different set of laws and regulations on this. I prefer the nuisance laws. They both boil down to the same thing, which is we determine this is basically causing a nuisance, that we have some authority to either stop the operation completely or to put conditions on the operation of this facility to try to abate those odors. I have some thoughts on that, which we can discuss, but that's kind of a synopsis of where we've been and where we are. From my perspective, I do think, I didn't find it in the fall. I thought it was annoying, but it didn't hit the nuisance. We all deal with noise and traffic and odors from our neighbors at times. And the fall, I didn't find it a huge problem. I didn't like it. I wouldn't like it either. The spring, it's hit a new level. I have to agree. So I do think we are in a situation where the board needs to take some action. My interactions with Mr. Halloran so far is I've never asked him to do anything he hasn't been willing to do. Have been a couple things. The berm has been dug into. We need to completely stop that. No more digging into that perimeter berm. And I think part of what I'd like to discuss if we go the odor control plan is some hours of operation, which would preclude weekend stuff, which largely agreed to, but the last couple weekends, I understand it hasn't been, and that's when we've been getting the odors. So there has been weekend work. We were told there wouldn't be, so I think we need to ensconce that.
Yeah, that's my error there. I mean,
Right.
I know I agreed not to do any weekend work, and in the spring, there was some machinery that was out of service and just got behind.
Understood, but I think we're at a point now where we need to go a much more formal route where that will be my suggestion, and again, that's up for discussion and vote by the board. We would put that in a formal order related to this. So what I'd kind of like to do first is open up to discussion of board members, ask questions. Mr. Halloran, you and your attorney, and Vinnie, you can present, and then we'll bring in, the neighbors can also weigh in, and after which I think the board can kind of publicly but deliberating on where we want to go on this. So Peter, John?
Well, I have, again, a couple questions on, have they come out and actually identified where the wells are and how far away they are?
We had a map of where the wells are. We looked at them visually.
Yeah.
It was clearly within 250 feet. And what DEP's done is ordering Mr. Halloran to get a surveyor in to actually clearly identify the wells and establish that 250-foot line. So it's on Mr., yes?
It's for the chair to Misty. He has hired an engineer who will come and do that.
Yeah,
So-
that's kind of like what the DEP is
Right.
wanted him to do.
Because that is a requirement of their regulations that he be outside of 250 feet from private wells. To be fair to Mr. Halloran, I'm not sure that requirement was in when he started. I think that was added somewhere along the lines. It's still pertinent. Like I said, I'm not sure, but we're at a point where that 250 feet needs to be adhered to. DEP
Yeah.
has said that that's their requirement, not ours.
I called last Thursday to get them down as soon as I
So,
can.
and, you know, I was there with DEP and Mr. Halloran and Vinnie, and nobody balked. I mean, nobody's fighting this, it's agreed, so it's not a
Yeah.
contentious issue.
Being a little late into this issue, while we were originally on the
I think
issue.
you were early, you were here
Yeah,
before
we're
I
early,
took a
and
break,
then
and we're still working on
it's a little
it.
Are you still bringing stuff in, and is stuff going out?
There's not really anything coming in now, not till the fall, the leaves come in.
Okay,
Just
so,
turning leaves in now.
so you
spring.
have what's there now, and when do they take that out? Will they take that out this summer?
Yes, that'll be taken out over the
Now,
summer.
you bring in soil to mix with it as well, right?
Correct, yes.
So you have the leaves that are brought in the fall, just leaf waste, and we've been out there and I haven't seen anything else. That's composted during the winter, a lot more in the spring, when obviously when it gets warmer. And at this time of the year, and I think this is probably the process which results in the release of odors, you break open those piles, you screen them, and you mix them with
Yeah.
dirt to create a.
And then you clean it all out? Is there any time when that's all empty?
For a short time there is, yeah.
In 3 years, I haven't once seen that property empty.
Well, it empties out and then, third week of October is when the new material starts to come in. From anywhere from Thanksgiving to Christmas, depending on the weather as far as snowfall and ground freezing. If the ground freezes and there's early snow, then, it pretty much ends around Thanksgiving. This last year, it was a mild winter, so they brought stuff until about Christmas.
Now, does there appear to be different smells from different piles, or is there?
I haven't ascertained that.
One-
There's a different smell in the fall than there is in the spring,
Is it
which
more
is
offensive
understandable given the
one time?
biological process.
Yeah.
Am I correct? When you move it with the machine, you can feel the smell.
Well, that's what it is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, you have
That's the
microbial
gas.
action that breaks down the organic matter. That creates a number of gases, and depending on how much oxygen is in there or not, you get different gases. When you break open a pile and basically disturb it, you're going to release those gases. It's worse in the spring because you have much more microbial action, and especially when you first break it open, where it's been a time, some of that stuff builds up. It slows down in the summer because you have less organic matter. You know this stuff more than I do, so jump in if I say anything stupid. But in the summer, you've got the heat that helps it break down, but you have, most of it's been degraded.
Right.
So it's slower in the winter because of the cooler temperatures. There's some degradation going on, but the spring, when it starts to warm up, and having some experience with this, I think I even told you guys, it's going to smell in the spring and the fall the most, and that's predictable with most compost. It's
So you know
Simple
that
biology.
some of these neighbor of yours, they feel the smell, so, and they really, some of them have asthma, you know what I'm saying? Is there any way you can just make sure you don't get as much as you do now? Can you cut down like 20% and put them in a different direction, so away from their home?
So Gina, let's
I know.
explore it first and
I
look at the
understand,
options.
this is not a mandate, this is just a
Once we have
conversation.
the line determined from the engineer, that's gonna make a big difference right
Okay.
there, is what we get to work with.
I suspect once they drive that, you're going to have less volume because you
Yeah,
have less
exactly,
area.
yeah.
Well, wouldn't we wait till we see how he does with
Right.
DEP? No, they've given him 21 days for this, 21 days for that, 21 days, and it seems like the longest period is 30 days.
Well, my suggestion, but when we get to that, is that if we look at unless there's a motion to basically close it down, and anybody's willing to make that when we do it, but let's get through the discussion first.
Right, discuss.
There's an odor control plan associated with that DEP permit. I would like us to be able to weigh in and have some influence on that. So that coincides with, doesn't wait till after, but coincides with the DEP process. And whenever you folks start working on that permit, one of my suggestions is that we be part of that process as well. So, yes, Sherry?
I was just going to comment that the composting is within the jurisdiction of the DEP, and so they're going to require this odor control permit, and I think when that comes through, as well as pushing back the line because of the wells, I think then we'll have an opportunity for all of us to come forward, and Rich has always done this voluntarily, and say, these are my proposals to try to mitigate some of these things, please allow us to try it.
So my suggestion to this board will be, when we get to that point in the discussion, because I do want to hear from the neighbors and such, is that we weigh in on that odor control permit as well, because there's some stuff that I'm not sure DEP has been part of this process. So, and that's all, that's going to be my suggestion. But I think it needs to be concurrently. You're obviously going to be working on an odor control plan with DEP. We can certainly have input on this and do it concurrently so it happens quickly for the neighbors and we don't draw out the process for you. If we go that way, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Question, have you done any odor control? Have you seen anything that DEP has suggested? Have you tried to put anything into?
Well, just trying to work, the beginning of the week with turning the leaves and not have any activity when the wind is blowing, in the neighbor's direction, that type of thing. So there are several steps we've taken,
And
The problem is.
And having no grass clippings also.
Yeah, the problem is, when I've been out there, in the absence of activity, the wind blowing brings that odor into the houses. It's not just during activity. So I'm kind of interested, and that's been time, and since a lot of these things are during the day, and I'm in Cambridge, I don't get out except on weekends. And so, that's when I've sort of noticed that. So I'm interested in seeing what that odor control looks like, because I'm not sure, just simple activity I don't think mitigates that odor, that issue.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to look and see what a more durable plan looks like.
Now, Richard, one of the things when we had the DP guy out, Mike Penny something?
Mike Penny.
Mike Penny was out there. He basically said there's some technical service, there's a number you can call for technical assistance. So again, as we move forward with this, what I'm kind of hoping we'll move to is working on that odor control plan during the next several weeks with input from DEP, this board, and I agree, there's activity, there's a strong relationship with activity and odors, but it doesn't explain all of it.
Yeah.
So some technical assistance from those guys might help with that odor control plan as well. And I know you guys have been doing stuff, and it's intuitively in part of what you do, but it does seem like we need to do more if we're going to do this. So, but I think, if I were you, I'd contact that number he gave you, and I think it may even be in the letter. Let's get that technical assistance person in there to see what they can offer. And I think DEP has some experience with this. We certainly have some thoughts. You and Vinnie have some experience, and between us, we should be able to work out an odor control plan.
Yeah, and I'll be on the engineer again tomorrow to get him out as soon as I possibly can.
Okay.
I mean,
But
what he
let's-
has to do is not very complicated, it's just a matter of getting him physically out there, so.
So let's talk more about the odor control plan when we hear from everybody, because that might influence some of the discussion on that. And again, at any point, when we get to this, the other option, it's a range of options we can do. The board can actually vote to close the operation if they think that. I'm not suggesting that, but there's a range of options out there. Gino, do you have any questions, or?
I know you're trying to do your best, but the question is, look how many people there is back of you. And some of them really get sick of it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I went there, and I gotta tell you the truth. I talked to Jeff. Who's Jeff here? And he was very kind to tell me that particular day there was no smell.
Yeah, I understand.
But I did go anyway, and then I called somebody else by name Shrod, something like that. Okay, don't make me look on the computer, okay?
So I have to say, for the most part, all the emails, all the interactions have been very civil. Your neighbors actually speak very well of you.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to keep it that way.
But anyway, I called another individual without mentioning him because I don't think it's appropriate. And I tried to get in touch with him so I can go in that area. And he was complaining about the odor coming in the house, and I was willing to go on my own time, which was on a Sunday. So I called up, and all of a sudden, the phone went like that. How are you going to have a conversation if somebody you call, and then they hang up on you? But thank you, Jeff, for being so kind, okay, I appreciate it. Like I say, I'm really concerned. I am, as much as I'm a friend of Richie, I've known for 30 years, and he's a good kid. He works, he doesn't do anything bad. But I wanted to make sure you get along with your neighbors. Because
Appreciate that.
whatever we do is not to put you down or close your business, because I will be against that. But you have to follow whatever regulation we give you and whatever regulation the DEP gave you. The line will be very helpful for the odor.
I agree.
Okay, so see if you can do that. And also, like I said, no Saturday, no Sunday.
No.
But you know, I think we're going to talk about that. I think we at this point need to take a formal role in this as
Anyway.
well. It's been
You
kind
want me
of
to say
ad hoc.
something, I said, okay?
Okay.
Don't get it, personal, okay?
But before we start planning what we're going to do, let's hear from Mr. Halloran, his attorney, Vinnie, and as well as the neighbors. And so let's give folks a chance to speak. John?
I guess one last question. So there's a question about how this is zoned.
Yep.
Are we getting a little bit ahead of ourselves if the zoning clarification, helps us understand what
Given
the
the
use-
fact that DP is already in motion with this, and that we're not sure how zoning is going to respond, and I think the neighbors are kind of sick of it, I think we do this
Right,
concurrently.
okay.
I mean, it may be that in 6 weeks, zoning comes back and says, no way, no how, and it solves it. But
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
interim, I think we owe it to everybody and ourselves
Fair
to
enough.
let's move forward with this. So, Peter?
Well, I think Richie would like to have me as his neighbor because I don't smell anything. And he lost my
Yeah.
total sense of smell years ago. So, but the question I have is, you're asking us to get into this odor mitigation, odor control, and there's nothing that explains what needs to be done. It's very nebulous. It's like odor control. What have we got to do? What's he supposed to do? How can we vote on something without knowing what
Well-
exactly the procedure is?
Well, I think that's part of it. That's what I was saying. I mean, I think we want to be part of that discussion. I want to see what that odor control plan is.
Yeah, I would too.
No, I
DP
think
is
that's,
going to have an odor control
Yeah,
plan,
they
it's already
better bring it
required in
to
their
us.
regulation.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts about what might be added to that DP might not have, because
Well,
they
that-
haven't been dealing with the
Something like that.
complaints and looking at some of the activities and the relation to the complaints and the site specifics. I think a lot of help could be had from DP's technical service providers, dealt with this a lot. So my suggestion is between Mr. Howland, Vinnie, DEP, the technical service provider, Jim, and this board, we can put together a better odor control plan than any one entity on that list could put together. So I have some thoughts for odor control. I think hours of operation are important because there clearly is a not complete relationship, but there is a relationship between activities and odor. I think if you quit every day at 4, it gives, in many cases, it'll give some of those odors a chance to dissipate. That's not going to fix everything. I would like something in writing that says, it's not the only thing, ma'am, I see you shaking your head, it's not the only part of it, but it is part of it. I would like to see something in writing that says no weekend work. I'd like this versus an ad hoc thing that frankly wasn't adhered to. I'd want to discuss that perimeter berm and actually not digging into that, which has been done. I'd like to discuss school vacation week and activity on school vacation week. And again, I'm fully aware that it's not just activity that does this, but there is some relationship between activity and odor, which makes biological sense, because you take a big pile of rotting stuff and you open it up, it's going to release odors. That's just common sense. So we talk about when that happens, we can mitigate some of those concerns for the neighbors. I'm hoping the technical service providers, I'm hoping as well that setback from the neighbors' wells it also results in a setback from the activities in neighbors' backyards. If we do go this route, I'm also aware that this may not adequately solve this issue, and that we still need to monitor this situation with a similar reporting system we have now. Hopefully, we'll go through the fall and the spring, and so we'll say, yeah, it wasn't that bad, it worked. If it doesn't work, we need to monitor this to make sure that it does, to bring it down below those nuisance levels. So that's what I'm thinking with the odor control plan. Before we have too much discussion, Mr. Howland, if you guys have any, sorry.
one more question. So we have the list of complaints and our individual board member visits and our thoughts. As part of that, we're also going to be able to cross-reference to a log of activity.
That's what we asked,
Do we have that?
and I believe Shelley, hadn't you asked for that?
I didn't.
And did we get that?
No, I didn't.
So we had asked for a log of activities
Yes,
as
we
well.
have that here tonight, so.
Okay,
All right, good.
so we obviously won't be able to do it now. By the way, this is double-sided. I looked at it and said, I went way more than that.
That's right, that's what I did.
Trying to save the town money.
Saving trees. Sorry, Richard, not to be forester too. So, Richard, Vinnie, Sherry, do you guys want to say anything?
Just Sherry Gould on behalf of Richie Halloran. I was just brought into it today, and I came over here right away, and I've seen the log, and I appreciate, I'm one of your neighbors too. I'm not close enough to smell it, but I know what you're going through. We both appreciate that. Mr. Halloran is going to work with DEP, with this board. He wants to be cooperative. He came running right over to say he would be cooperative. I think you all know that he's always been cooperative.
Yep.
sometimes gets ahead of himself, as do many of us who work on our land, on our own property, but he didn't do it and ask for forgiveness. He had his permits, he's done everything he's supposed to do under the DEP, and now that the complaints are coming in, he will do more. So I would appreciate this board giving him the time to get the engineer on site. Hopefully, the engineer will have an odor control plan. I don't know, I mean, just listening to you all, I'm wondering if digging a hole and composting deeper into the ground instead of up on the surface of the ground is something that could be done. But I leave it to the engineers to make some suggestions and come back here.
Well, I think on the odor control plan, if we go that road, I think a number of us need to work together, the board, DEP, the engineer, and again, that I would highly, I may require that you contact that technical service provider.
Yeah, call them.
And it's free,
Yeah.
you know, and these guys have experience with it. So before we really deliberate on what we do, I do want to let the neighbors talk and offer their perspective and any thoughts you guys might have on what we can do. I'm asking folks to keep it civil. I understand a lot of you have lost patience. I appreciate that, but we do ask it to be civil. And so we'll open up and we'll just go around. Nicole, how about you?
All right, so I do want to apologize if I do get emotional, but this has been going on.
Emotional's okay as long as it's civil.
Well, I don't know, no, I can probably promise that. This has been happening for 3 years, and so, in essence, you know, I go to bed every night thinking that someone else is profiting off of my suffering. I mean, and that is essentially what it is. I wake up every morning, I do a smell check. It's really, from when I go to bed to when I wake up at night, someone else is profiting off of my suffering. So I just wanted to go through a few things, because I know some people are new and some people are coming back and revisiting this, that it has been 3 years. The first complaint started in August of 2013.
Could I interrupt you just a second? Where do you live in relation?
I live on 3 Colonial Drive.
She's at the corner of Harwood and Colonial,
I am
Okay.
one of the affected
which
ones.
I have to say, there have been times I've been out there,
8 or 9?
3.
3.
Right in the corner.
right at the corner,
Right up
Peter.
the corner, okay.
So I have to say, you're the lower lying neighbor, lowest lying neighbor, and I have to say, there's times I've been on that compost site with no wind, and I haven't smelled anything on the compost site that I smell stuff at that location.
And you have a well too, right?
Yes, 108 feet from the berm.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that the well, in my location of the well close to the facility, was brought to the board in April of 2014. So at least then, it was very clear in the regulations that the permit for composting the regulation states 250 feet. It's very clear in the regulations, you don't need to be a scientist or an engineer to read the regulations. The DEP relies on the operator to provide this information to them when they're issuing the permit. So this is clearly a miss, whether on purpose or not, I don't know, but it's very clear in the regulations that it's 200.
I can say that we did bring that to DP's attention about a year ago, and we didn't get a response. We brought it back again. I don't know what happened before that, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get.
I'm not making
into-
excuses, I'm
Yeah.
just clarifying what was done and when.
I just want to give an overview of what the neighborhood has been going through, and that it's over the top. I'm actually asking that you issue a stop because of the odor nuisance, because it has been 3 years. 3 years of my life. And I know that you guys go and visit and stuff like that, but you don't live there. You don't experience the same thing. I do have confidence issues when we talk about an odor control plan, because we've been talking about this for a while. I think originally in October 2013, we started talking about Richard bringing in a professional and having an odor control plan back in December of 2013. It's 2016. We talked about not touching the berms as early as December 2013, and they were just touched recently. That is the most simple regulation to follow. It's an on or an off. It's touch it or don't touch it. He continues to touch it. And it's so black and white, I lose confidence in following a plan because the simple regulations that have been put in place have not been followed so far. We have also had concerns, not just the odor, but the wells and the air quality. So I suffer from asthma, and so the dust and the pollutants or the allergens that come off of the pile, the bioaerosols, do affect my lungs. I do have a hard time breathing. My eyes do get all red and teary, and I can't go outside. So I've gone most of the spring with the windows in my house all closed. All closed. So tomorrow's going to be a 90-degree day, and though there hasn't been any work activity, I'm going to have to keep my windows closed because the smell is still present. Agreed that it is much more present when there's activity on the property, but even when there isn't, the smell is in my house.
And just to build on that a little bit, one of our neighbors who couldn't be here tonight does have to leave his home in the middle of the night and sleep in his car in a different part of the neighborhood because it does get so bad overnight, and clearly there's no activity going on.
So, I mean, essentially, I think just asking for a control plan is really irresponsible at this stage. We've waited 3 years to come up with an odor control plan or some kind of odor management, and between Richard and Boston Bark, that hasn't happened. He's failed this neighborhood, and I've worked directly with him, trying to resolve it, trying to be a friendly neighbor. I've even reached out to Boston Bark, and I have had no success. So while I'm pursuing the DEP option for my safety as well, I'm asking the Board of Health, I'm pleading with the Board of Health to help my physical well-being and health, because I can't continue to live in this kind of environment. It's not healthy either emotionally or physically for me to be in this environment anymore. I don't have faith that a control plan is going to resolve the problems. I just don't. And that's based on data from past history, from meeting minutes from these meetings.
I have to say, since I've been on the board, we haven't discussed an odor control plan. I'm not saying it wasn't in the past, but I haven't seen it discussed in the last couple of years at this board.
It's in the meeting minutes.
Yeah, but I think it hasn't been in the last couple of years, at least I don't recall
Which is
discussing it.
even more disappointing that it happened so long ago.
Again, I'm not making excuses, I'm just trying to put stuff in perspective when it
Yeah.
happened, so.
I mean, I think that just furthers the point, or my disappointment in kind of, and I guess, I've said it to you, I've said it to Jim, I'm disappointed in this board in protecting my well-being, my ability to enjoy the property for 3 years.
Maybe you don't have to answer this, I imagine. Is your asthma recently diagnosed? Was this a recently diagnosed?
Since I was living in Littleton, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I've been diagnosed with other issues since, so I'm actually at home all day. So while it's nice to try and move it to the beginning of the week and do it during the day, it doesn't help me at all, and I'm assuming it won't help the kids this summer either.
I have a quick question. I know we've always talked about the odor, but you bring up something different about this particulates or something in the air.
It's natural part of composting. It's,
Have they measured that? Has anybody
and
measured
bacteria.
that to see?
I've brought it up, I think it's a responsibility of the state.
Yeah, DEP would do that, and I don't think they
Okay.
could do this. Bioaerosols, particulates are a little bit
Bioaerosols.
different, where it'd be dust and things like that. It is a very dusty site when I've been on there, but I haven't heard too many of you complain about that, other than to see it occasionally coming off there. But that may be something. Have you seen dust? Has anybody seen dust on their property from this?
It's not on my
Tell what
property,
it's
just
from.
in the air.
What's that?
We're dusty, it's hard to say what it's from.
Okay. Because I'm just driving in there when there has been rain, there's a lot of dust. And I've been actually kind of surprised we haven't had complaints from the neighbors on that. But that doesn't seem to be the bigger issue, is the odors and.
Anecdotally, I'll come home from work and be more congested than I have been at work all day, but
Yeah.
it's hard to pinpoint what.
But it's natural for bioaerosols to be released into the air, which is fungal spores and bacteria. So I guess with a compromised respiratory issue, it's making it even worse for someone like me, or someone like John across the street who has asthma. I think I'm
Anybody
done.
else has a comment?
Well, let's just go. Do you have anything, or you want to, that you haven't said
Do you have
already?
anything
I'm just
to
going
say?
to let everybody talk, so we're going to go up and down the row.
Yeah, Nicole's my wife, so I think she said it better than I ever could, but I think just,
Front man, right?
we have been, I definitely have been avoiding, entertaining people at our house and really taking full use of the property ever since this started. My parents are coming to visit from Ireland in September. I'm really at my wit's end as to what I can do in terms of having them stay at our place, because it really, I think you used the term microbial action, which is a nice way of saying rotting, and it really is. It may be leaves that's causing the smell, but rotting leaves have about as much relation to leaves as a corpse does to a human being. But it does not smell like leaves in any way, shape, or form. It really is quite
Yeah.
revolting.
No, in the spring, I agree. In the fall, I mean, it was a leaf smell when they dropped it off. It was stronger, but in the fall, in the spring in particular, it is a different smell, I agree.
My name is Kate McLaughlin. I live at 9 Colonial Drive, so I'm right next to Dylan and Nicole. So we abut Richard. The berm is, my guess, is 50 to 60 feet from the berm is where our wellhead is located. I have 3 small children. Daniel is 7, Tessa is 4, and the baby is 1.5. We are home all day, all of us. I conduct classes in my home. I conduct meetings for Littleton Community Farm that I'm a board member of in my home. We have historically always done a lot of entertaining. We do a lot of educating. We do a lot of community service for our church, for different organizations out of our home. I echo everything that Nicole said, particularly the lack of confidence in odor control measures. At the last hearing that we were all at, it wasn't a plan exactly, but there were measures discussed, such as not turning the pile when the wind was going a certain way, not working on different days. I would say that this spring, the odor is as bad, if not worse, than it has ever been. Now, I also have asthma. I can get home, be perfectly fine out wherever I've been, walk into the house and be unable to breathe. I notice that my children start sneezing and wheezing. There are times, including yesterday evening, where the odors were so bad that it burns the back of your throat. The kids are complaining, and this is with the windows shut and locked in my house, in weather where I should be able to have the windows open. It's burning the back of my throat, and there have been times where I have dry heaved because it has been so noxious. Very often, the odor is not just the smell of rotting leaves, which there have been times when Jim Gareffi has come over and said, well, it smells like rotting leaves, but it is strong. But there are times when I definitely feel like there's an extremely strong chemical component, almost like that turpentine smell.
I have smelled the turpentine odor.
And that happens very, very often. It's very strong on weekends quite often. I am not pleased with this idea of trying to concentrate the turning and the odor stuff during the day, because that's when my children are outside. And I moved to Littleton so that they could be outside, so that they could run free, so that we could be in a healthy community. We moved out of Boston for this. We bought here. Our first home, we invested hugely. We're at the very bottom of being able to afford Littleton. We're actually looking at homes in other places. I love this town. And sorry, I'm not an emotional person, and I don't like doing this in front of people, but I appreciate Richard. I appreciate everything that he's done. I think he's very neighborly, very kind, and a man of just extreme goodwill. We're also small business owners, so I totally respect his need to have a livelihood and to use his land as he sees fit. But what's going on there is a commercial endeavor happening in a residential neighborhood with neighbors that are a stone throw away. And my children's health is being affected, my health is being affected. I'm afraid for us, and I'm afraid that we're going to have irreversible problems if we don't leave. And we are looking at moving. And I'm not sure that our property will fetch the value that it should have. And I'm also not sure that we would be able to sell, depending on the time of year we try and sell, given what's going on and the fact that there is public record of a lot of nuisance complaints. So I would ask the board as well to please consider shutting this down. 250 feet will make no difference. It will reduce things to a degree, but if what's happening is affecting our health and our well-being, which it clearly is, in a large degree, then continuing to do it at, say, 3/4 from 250 feet out is still going to affect us. We have neighbors here that are well more than 250 feet away, and they smell it just as strongly and are just as affected. So I also feel like this has gone on for too many years. This is not the property I purchased. We've had guests leave our home because it has smelled so bad, and my children often can't play outside. Thank you.
Just to
We're
echo
going
what,
down the line,
what-
so we get to you.
My name is Amy Syak, and I live at 8 Colonial Drive, right, which is adjacent from Nicole and right across the street from
Okay.
Kate.
We're going down the line, we'll get to you. Okay.
Just to let you know I'm here.
Okay.
Right, we haven't
We
moved.
do have a sign-in sheet,
We've
so.
also tried looking for houses outside of Littleton because I'm not happy with how it's gone. And I have talked to people here about I could never have an open house. How could I have an open house? So it's definitely affecting the value of my home.
Ma'am, do you?
Yes, I'm new to the party, and yet I've probably lived in this town longer than any of the closer neighbors. Mr. Yap knows the location and the family. The first time I smelled this odor was last winter when I was working out in the property. And I was with another person who said, "Do you smell that?" And I said to her, "Do you smell that?" And we just then felt like we should go
Can I ask where you
outside.
are in relation, what's your address?
I'm sorry, excuse me,
Is that-
on Newtown Road,
Okay.
537, and realizing where it's coming from now, I'm further away than any of these people. I'm beyond the next street. I mean, I was really surprised, and I live to the west. The wind primarily comes from the west to the east, and yet I'm smelling it regularly now. Regardless, if the wind is going in different directions, I'm smelling it. If it's a strong wind from the west, obviously, it's being carried a different way. But the very first time that I smelled it, I said, well, this is some kind of chemical. And I've been thinking about it, and I think you have to think, well, and then people say, well, it's organic. Well, yes. But is it tamoxifen? There's some kind of a chemotherapy drug that comes from the bark, B-A-R-K,
So that's-
trees.
We
So
don't care
that's-
that it's organic or not, we've
Yeah.
toxicologists here, it doesn't matter.
So that's, you're thinking of Taxol, of which
Whatever.
tamoxifen
But
was
it
derived from
comes
Taxol,
out of
so.
bark of trees. and
Well, it comes
it's
from the yew bushes you have in front of your
nauseous.
house, the little red berries
If
on.
I had a cure for cancer though, and it turned out that, just,
So,
that's not gonna happen,
anyway,
No, but
we don't fall, nobody here is falling into the trap that because it's organic, it's safe. Cobra venom and aflatoxin are all organic and natural, we get it.
the first thing I thought was, this is a chemical odor, what could it be? I mean, I've lived in places where there has been pig poop sprinkled all over the neighbor's yard, and you have to put up with that for a while, but you know what that is. That's very obviously what that is. And it's for a farm, and, they're growing things on the farm, and it's gonna produce something. I hate to do this, I've known Richard as long as I've lived here, and I have had no serious beef with Richard. But it just seems like it went from a one-man operation cutting wood to now wood is brought in there and is processed. It's become an industrial processing operation of at least two
So
different.
our issue is really the composting, nobody's
I
brought up wood,
understand,
so
but-
if we could stick to that
Okay.
particular issue. That's a zoning thing, we'll talk
But
about that.
I now am highly sensitive to, and I've had 3 or 4 people who have stopped by to see me who've said, "What's that smell?" I've come out to greet them and they'll say, "What's that smell?" And I'll say, "Oh, yeah, well, that's what that is." And, I'm in and out, sometimes I don't get home till 10 o'clock at night, so I don't smell it every single day. I'm in and out and around. But I find it personally very upsetting, and I don't want to be in my yard with that odor. And if I were to want to sell my house, I'm wondering what weather reports I'd have to look at before I invited people to come in. I'm serious, I couldn't be more serious. It's really bad.
Nobody's doubting you, I mean,
It's really bad, and I'm sorry, I wasn't gonna do this, but I just met this person the other day because I heard this meeting was going to happen, and standing at her house and seeing the truth of her environment, it's, boy, I don't know, it's really unfortunate. It has become something inconsistent with what should be happening in the neighborhood. It simply doesn't belong there, that's all.
Ma'am?
We're actually at 553 Newtown Road, and we have not smelled it. We're kind of here for information gathering.
Okay.
So-
Just background information.
Yeah, we're far enough away that I doubt it.
Okay, that's fair.
We could.
Public meeting, so. I think you need cable, but you're welcome to be.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask their names, please?
What about you, young lady?
Names, please. Their names, please.
Everybody signed in, so we can make copies of the sign-in
Thank you,
sheet for
okay.
folks after. Okay, now you get to go.
So my husband's been at 8 Colonial Drive a lot longer than myself, but I've been there for 12 years now. And it's been probably the past 3 years that we've literally had to close our windows almost every night to prevent the smell from coming in. I have really bad sinuses, so I don't have the best smeller in the world, but it is strong and I am affected by it. My husband has severe asthma as well as other handicap issues, and he's also affected by it. It's gotten to the point now where you can't enjoy a summer afternoon or a spring afternoon. We're trying to do organic gardening. I wonder how that's possible. Will we use a well? Water to wash to water things and so on and so forth.
Organic certification, we don't want to go there, that, as you know, that's a complicated.
No, I'm not trying to say that, but this is my
Right.
personal yard.
Right.
My personal wishes, and I feel as though it's almost like an invasion on my privacy, on my ability to live a normal life, because I can't just go outside and enjoy something when it's assaulting sometimes. And the first time I actually complained about it was so bad that I literally had to have somebody come over and confirm it. Like, am I imagining the smell? What is this? And that's when Richard first said, it's because he put too much greenery or something in the compost and turned it. So he says, I won't do that again. And so I was high hopes the next year, and it's not ending. And I actually work for a real estate agency and looked into it and dug into it, and there are some legal and some laws against what's happening to my property right now, as far as values and how far away an industrial business can be from my agriculturally zoned home. So that's my thing, and personally, I'm not going to apologize. I pay taxes, and I expect the town to pay attention to not just one smoke fire, but a bunch of other people saying there's something terrible going on. I won't name people who are not here right now, but there are other people that live half a mile away, that can smell it on some days.
When we originally started the reporting, we asked you to share it with folks, and if and however we move forward, we still do reporting. I'd ask you to share it with them, because that's hard for us to consider that information when we don't hear from those folks.
Absolutely, and I know it's hearsay, but.
Depending how we move forward, if we continue to do this reporting system, please share it with them. We want to hear from those folks. We're not trying to preclude them, but when we get told there's people half a mile and we never hear from them, it's anecdotal at that point, is all I'm saying. So please, if we move forward, we want to hear from everybody who's impacted. If that's part of it, we'll see where we go tonight.
We'd just like to figure out a way to make it work for everyone. I understand that he has a business and he wants to run it and he's trying to make money. But unfortunately, it's not working for us or anybody else.
Thank you. Sir?
Jim Drew, I'm on number 1 Richard Way, and my wife was the one who really wanted to be here, but she sent me. So, I mean, I can't add much more context to what everyone has already said. I mean, it's quite strong at times, and you know, I will also echo that, you know, Richard's a great guy. I have no problems with him as a neighbor. He's been a great guy. But, you know, the operation itself, I think, is the challenge. It's not Richard and what he's trying to do. It's just kind of what the realities of the operation are. And, yeah, it's very difficult. Similar situations, you know, where we've had, you know, people over to our house and they've kind of left saying, oh, man, I can't stay here, you know. Similar thing with the windows closed. I mean, just echoing everything that's already been said, so.
Sure.
Yep, I'm Greg McGurn. I live at 7 Richard Way, and Admittedly, in one of these meetings last year, I said that I thought that the smell had been decreasing since it started back in 2013. And what I've noticed just in the last 2 weeks, since it started to get really warm out, I've been keeping track, and the last 12 days, I've smelled a pretty strong odor, at least the last 8 of the last 12 days. Granted, I don't get it as bad as the folks on Colonial, but where I am, I can still smell it. And I was just, starting to feel that, it almost seems like we've taken a step back, where I thought things had been improving little by little over the last couple of years, but we seem to be back where we were when the issue first started. So again, an odor control plan, I'd be interested to see what that really means and what specific actions will be taken to reduce the odor, because otherwise I just feel that we're not making a lot of progress in terms of reducing the odor, reducing the smell, reducing the amount that people are impacted by it. So other than that, just keep the windows closed when it's smelly outside. Sometimes the kids don't want to go outside, just like other people said too. Don't want to have people over because we're just not sure if the wind's blowing a certain way, is it going to smell, and we'll be able to use our property the way that we want to. Thanks.
Jeff Schachter, 6 Richard Way. That's what I want to say. First of all, I'm glad Nicole and Kate spoke first. I think you guys both were very eloquent, and I mean, you're certainly more impacted by it because you're closer and you're more directly downwind. But I work at home. I smell it every time the wind's coming from the south, regardless of whether there's activity going on the property. And I think a lot of my thoughts have already been said, so I don't want to be redundant, but I want to emphasize a couple things. This has been going on for 3 years. I know a number of the board members are new, but it's reached the point where I agree. I'm not sure I have much confidence in, let's put another plan together. Let's see, let's wait another month and see what's going to happen. I mean, how much longer does this have to go on before people acknowledge that it's a problem? What's the threshold that we have to reach? How many neighbors have to be here? How many people have to say their health is being affected or their smell is being affected, their ability to enjoy their property is being affected, before we finally say enough is enough? What's 1 more month going to do? What's 2 more months going to do? This business has been going on for 3 years, and it's been apparent, I believe, to the people operating it, that there have been odor problems that the neighbors have had for 3 years. They've had ample time to react proactively to do something about it, and nothing has happened. And I also want to ask the board if we would all be debating this if it was something other than smell. Hypothetically, if there was a property bordering all of us where there was loud noise constantly, day and night, there'd be no discussion. That would be shut down. If instead of piles of leaves, we were looking at suppose we didn't even see it. Suppose it was a 1-story factory building belching out the same smell out of a smokestack. I don't think there'd be any debate. So I'm not sure, I don't understand the hesitancy in trying to act on this simply because they're piles of leaves.
It's not because they're piles of leaves, and it's not really a hesitancy. The difference between, say, a noise complaint, having dealt with this a few times in my career, and an odor complaint is you can measure decibels. And DEP and the state actually have quantifiable limits for decibels and hours of operation and that sort of thing. So that's a relatively easy thing to measure. Odor, and this is an excuse, but it's a reason, I guess, is much more subjective. It's, as you've seen in your own neighborhoods, I mean, I was there, I stopped at your house today and we didn't smell anything, then we get a whiff of it and then it went away. It's much harder to document. And that's largely what we've been doing for the last year with the odor reporting thing, is documenting it. And because there is no measurable odor index, Peter doesn't smell much, I spend half my time on farm, so I guarantee if I compare my reporting numbers to yours, it's lower. That's why we have 5 board members, that's why you asked you folks to do it, so we could get some sort of consensus, which is defensible, no matter what action we take. But that's the difference between noise and odor. And in some cases, you've got other pollutants that might be air pollution, like particulates are easy to measure. Odor's really hard, and talk to anybody who deals with odor at a Board of Health or the state who deals with this, and it's not measurable.
A family farm with manure smells, which I'm quite familiar with myself, is a whole lot different than this chemical smell that comes through my window, and it smells like somebody drop toxic waste. It's a different smell. It's not.
We understand
it's
that,
not
but again, it's
pleasant.
subjective, but
Even manure is more
I've also
pleasant.
dealt with family farms with pesticide smells. So, I mean, we've got a bunch of issues there. Odors are just very tough to document and very tough to measure, which when you're in government and you need to document something and show there's a problem, odors are hard. I think we've done that in the last year.
So this isn't enough data?
No, this is enough data for us to take action. We've got to discuss on the board, and you're going to be here for that, and that's why we're getting your input now, so we can discuss it to see what the consensus of the board is on how we should act on this. So that's why we've been doing it this way. It's not simply putting a meeting up and say, oh, the smell level 6, you get a different level, you get a different.
It is a nuisance, so let's issue the
Right.
violation, it's gonna stop, I'm losing my mind,
Yeah, Jeff?
To that point, because it can't be measured, what does an odor mitigation plan do for us? How do we know that it's working?
I didn't say
Other than all
it couldn't be
of us
measured. I
putting
mean, the
up-
way we're attempting to measure it is get as much input as possible and look for some consensus, particularly among the board members, you guys to alert us and the board members to do it. And that's what we've done, and I think we've got at least consensus from the three of us here who've been working on it, that it's reached nuisance levels.
I feel like it reached nuisance levels 2 years ago. I don't know how many times my husband has written or called and had somebody come down and smell it. I don't know how many
Well,
times.
you came in late, and we sort of discussed some of the history of this, where, essentially, the first year we went out, we put some measures into place that we thought would work. They didn't work. We put limitations on grass clippings that could be brought in. We thought that would do it, and grass clippings do smell, and anybody who deals with composting will tell you that's the first thing to go. We put the berm up, and that was it. There were smells for a while. Ann Laurie, who was the chair at the time, thought it was a wetland, so she explored that. It became clear it wasn't wetlands, and that's when we've done it. So you can fault us for not acting quickly enough, for not doing this sooner.
I don't think anybody's assigning.
But no, and I'm not
I think
saying-
What we're
but-
saying is, and I mean, let's not even go with the berms. The
And-
berms are the most ridiculous, unattractive thing
And it's
that
the
somebody has
simplest
to put
thing.
within their backyard.
Don't
never mind.
touch it. How is he gonna follow an odor control plan if he can't even not touch a pile of crap?
Can
Well,
I just say
so we haven't gotten to the odor control plan, so let's discuss that.
Just
Yeah.
real quick, first of all, I do want to thank the board for being really responsive. I feel like at least in this last year, you guys have been really responsive, and I really appreciate your work, because I know it's a lot of trips out. So I just wanted to say that. But also, if we go with an odor control plan, what that's asking us to do is to wait more than a year to see through the course of the year, when things come, when things start to wake up in the spring, throughout next summer. That's another year of all of us needing to live where we live. I spend every day, all day, in that house or around that house. That is a long time to then try and gather this very subjective data. I think we all understand what you're saying, that there's no real metric for odor, but that is a long, it's not like you can just come out and say in a week, oh, this isn't working, or it is working. That's a year, and then if he's asked to shut down, that's going to be another several months to move those piles and find a new location. That could be a year and a half. This could be 2 summers, in addition to this one that we're talking about. And that's really significant. That's a long, long time.
Okay. There's one gentleman back who hasn't had a chance to speak.
I'm here just listening.
Okay. Anyhow, so the board at this point, we've heard from Mr. Halloran, we heard from his attorney, you've heard the kind of legal history and what DEP is doing. There's a DP activity that's going on as we speak. The first thing of order is, I would like the board's support for writing a letter to the zoning, to Roland, then going on to the zoning board of appeals to determine whether this is appropriately zoned for this activity.
Okay, before we go into any discussion of
Sure.
board action, I'd like to give sort of my thoughts on
Okay,
this.
please.
So, I've been on the board for about a year, and so not, trying to, in addition to everything else we do on the board and other things that I do, trying to learn what's going on and understand the scope of this, the time of this. This tells me the scope. Unfortunately, I share some of the concerns that you guys do, because unfortunately, what I don't have here is a cross-referenced activity, which I assumed was something I'd see ahead of time. and I can't see it. So that disappoints me greatly and calls into question any compliance to anything we do, okay? So I want to me, there are two concerns that I have just thinking about things. Not necessarily role of Board of Health, but as Board of Health, I have a concern about the health, and I think of, and it's why I asked the question of when you were diagnosed with asthma. So if anybody is aware or has been involved into the literature, particulate-induced asthma is the greatest threat to our children's health. More of a threat than diabetes, all right? And this has a concern, right? So to me, that has a real concern. And then the other concern that I have is about property values. So to me, there's a Board of Health thing, and then there's a zoning thing. One of the things, the reason why I asked about the zoning part of it and the DEP part of it is about the timelines, actually. It wasn't to let's do this sequentially, but do it in parallel, so that's fine. But as I sit here and listen to everything, and as I thought about this ahead of time, the timing of those sorts of things are of concern. And this isn't my area of expertise, so I don't know what an order plan, control plan looks like, or how it's enforced. So these are the concerns I have. I certainly have a recommendation that I would like to throw out there when it's appropriate to throw in a recommendation. I'll let me know when that is. But certainly something I would like to propose, that if we can do it. I don't even know if we have the power to do what I'd like to propose. But I certainly wanted to make sure that my concerns were out there. Like I said, I have hay fever. So unfortunately for everybody, the time of the years that this is an issue, I go out there and like everybody else, I'm like, yeah, I can smell something, but it's a 2 or a 3. But that's because I have a somewhat diminished sense of smell during this time of the year. But when I can smell it, that's when you know it's going to be something. So I do think this is far more serious than, and because of everything, I have a bit of concern about compliance in anything we do. And so in part of any odor control plan, I don't want to know what the enforceability of that is and how it's enforced. Yep. So those are my sort of thoughts. And when we get to a point of like some recommendations, I'd like to throw out one thing when we're ready for that.
So let me respond quickly to the enforceability. Unfortunately, what we haven't done is put any of this stuff in writing. You know, Jim would say, don't disturb the berm. I don't think it's been in writing. It has been disturbed. One of the things I would suggest if we go this route is that certainly it's in writing and there are discrete things, and this board accept a very low threshold of violation.
Yeah.
But we haven't had it in writing. There are certain things in there which are going to be there. We haven't gotten there yet. Don't worry, Kate. We're just discussing potential right now. So, and certainly, the first thing I'd like to, so we have 3 agencies that have action here. First, we have DEP, which I think it's very clear in the letter what they're taking. Okay, we've had some influence on that, not as early as we had tried, but we finally did get them out here. I think the letters that some of you sent probably helped. Thank you. But we didn't ignore DEP, and we had them out, and we had been pointing them to the well issue for some time. But it's their regulation and their permit. I would like the permission of the board to write a simple letter to zoning, asking them for clarification on whether this is acceptable. I have a lot of experience with the agricultural exemptions for zoning, and this doesn't qualify. So, but that's a zoning issue, it's not ours. So first, does anybody have an objection from the board if I write a letter to zoning, asking them to clarify the use of this property?
No, I think that's a legitimate question.
Yeah, I'm zoned residential, but I'm under agricultural classification.
That's what's in question, Richard.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so you and your lawyer and the zoning board can take it up, but we're going to basically write to them and say, can you please look at this and determine whether this is appropriate?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, I sit on the zoning board and I would have to recuse myself from any of that deliberation at all because I've represented him here. But I wanted to just clarify, your letter needs to first go to the zoning enforcement officer.
Right, it will go to Roland, who will then send it on to you folks. I've already spoken to Roland about this.
Actually, the zoning board has no authority to make a zoning determination. That's Mr. Bernier's domain. And for everyone's benefit here, anyone who's aggrieved by his decision, whichever way it goes, then has a right of appeal to the zoning board of appeals.
Okay.
So that's just for clarification.
Well, Roland had suggested to me he was going to pass it on to the ZBA, but I suggested Roland says no, you'll have a letter from these folks.
Well, that's
here.
if anybody appeals his decision.
Okay. So, thank you for clarifying that. It will go to Roland. Can we inform this folks of what Roland's decision is? I assume he will write back to the board, and we can let you folks know, in which case you would appeal to the ZBA. So,
And we would have to file it.
yes. So,
Unless it goes
you're the
back.
agreed party, we're not, so, you're the agreed party, so if Roland says no, and you feel it's inappropriate, then you're the agreed party, you guys have to do it individually, it's however you want to do it, probably a lot of individual letters would probably be the best way to do it. So that crosses out those two things. The next one is how we act on. Jim has given a statute and a set of regulations he thinks we can act under. I actually prefer the nuisance statute. For your folks, it really doesn't matter, that's paperwork, it boils down to the same thing, which is whether this is a nuisance or whether this is an activity of air pollutant that impacts on people's ability to use their land. The board has the authority to shut this operation down, put conditions on it, or do whatever we have. And as chair, one of the options that's been put forward is an odor control plan. One of the options that we have is shutting them down. John, I think you had some other, you had another.
So I think I'm somewhere in the middle. And what I would like to propose is that that operations are temporarily suspended until these various things are resolved and we have answers back. Because if this takes a while, we're going to get through a whole nother season, and then it's going to be another season. So I think it certainly was the first thing that jumped out of my mind, even before that point was brought up. So, and I wrote that down right from the beginning. So what I'd like to propose is that if we have that ability to take action of a temporary cessation of operations until the berm is moved, till the order control plan is established, including enforcement, and then review from the zoning officer. And clarification, and of course, if it's zone residential and not part of the agriculture exempt, then that takes action in of itself, I think. So that's what I personally like to see happen, or propose that.
So that would allow us to get clarification from zoning. It would allow us to see where DP sets that perimeter up and what the volume of stuff would go on there. And it would give time to have an odor control plan go into place.
Into place, that's right.
And with us having input on it and that sort of thing.
Right, so get all the plan in, and then move forward back with operations.
So is that a motion?
I would like to make that motion. If that falls under ours, and I think it does, I think, my understanding, I'd like to make a motion.
May I ask a question, just a point of clarification?
Sure.
If you do this motion and it carries, would it be possible for all of the neighborhood to be alerted to this and come back together in a couple of months and see what these plans are and have them explained to us, so that we're not just kind of getting little bits of information and then not having any, basis for
You can amend your motion to include that not go back into place until we get input from the neighbors on the odor control and mitigation.
Yeah, I will amend that to make sure.
Before we take comment, we need a seconder, there's no
Yeah,
point in
I
taking.
understand.
Yeah, no,
I
Sherry
just-
was raising
yeah.
her finger, so.
Could you go over that, your motion again?
All right, so I'd like a motion that we order a temporary cessation of the operations, of these composting operations.
By temporary, how long do you mean?
Until we have the following in place. Clarification of location of the berm and moving of the berm such that it is within that 250 feet.
So that is basically 21 days we'll have that location.
Again, if it's enforceable, that actually happens.
Right.
So I'm sensing a lack of trust that that's going to happen. Also, that an odor control plan is established, including enforcement, with input and discussion by affected neighbors, that they would come back, but prior, and we'd have an open discussion in a meeting. And then, and also then review and a decision by the zoning officer. Now, and to clarify, if the zoning officer comes back and says he does have that agriculture exemption and can move forward, then to me, that's met that. You guys could appeal that, but that to me would be outside of this temporary cessation. And that would be something you then, but so that's the motion, is a temporary cessation of operations until those three things are established and in place.
But we need a second and to see whether there's any discussion, Charlie. So we have a motion on the floor, do we have a second?
I want to just make a comment.
But we need a second before we have discussion, Gino. It's just Robert's rules.
Well,
Blame Robert, not me.
if I can't be heard, I'm not going to second.
You're going to be heard, but we need a second before, okay, go ahead, Gino.
I say that what you're doing, it's right, but the question is, you're going to be override by the DEP. This motion
No,
is not
DP
valid.
can't override that.
No, I'm telling you. You gotta wait. You just can't just shut it down for 21 days. First, you gotta go through the motion first. We gotta go through the motion, then we'll make the
So
decision.
I don't, it's my understanding that we don't, and I don't
We don't
have
have-
any faith that
I don't
that this
know.
government agency is going to act within 21 days, or frankly, that the
You know
operator is
something?
going to act within 21
You know
days.
something, you can put them out of business. The question is, they'll be happy. But why don't we go by step, and then we'll agree?
Because we don't, in my mind, we,
So we're getting ahead of ourselves. I believe we do have the authority here, but there's a way this operates under Robert's rule. We have a motion, and we look for a second. Now, under the abridged version of Robert's rules, when you have less than 12 board members, the board can vote.
Okay,
So, do we have a second?
I'll give you the second. but let
Okay,
me-
so we have a second. Now let's open up the discussion, Gina. There's a way to do this. The board discusses them, we'll open up to the audience, including you, sir.
I say, when you say wait 21 days, it's going to be waiting 6 months. All right? Well, you can't do that.
John, I think
You're going to put them out of business.
so if it waits 6 months, then that tells me that there's going to be operations for 6 months before there's any activity, and
If
that's
we
not
go by
fair to the
legally,
others.
step by step, then we have the authorization to enforce it. Otherwise, you will not be able to enforce it, and then you disappoint all those people.
You do have the authorization, you're the Board of Health.
Yeah, we do have.
We've got the authority about the nuisance laws and the air control stuff that Jim sent.
Yeah.
The other thing I point out is John didn't say wait 6 months. He gave specific benchmarks, which would be the DEP action.
Let's see for the DP first.
So if DEP takes 6 months, and we've got an issue already. because
Exactly my point.
Now, DEP said 21 days. I believe it will be 21 days. We've got zoning, which zoning can take as long as they want, I guess, but, I think Roland might make a quick answer. You guys can be quick with your appeal. I don't think it'll take long for you guys to do that.
We're gonna be pushing the DEP to finish up in 21 days. We
Well,
want this
DEP, it's not DEP's done in 21 days, it's on Richard now.
21 days that he has to have his thing.
One second, we have board discussion first. We have board discussion first, then we'll open it up. So, Peter, do you have anything to say?
Well, first of all, the timeframes that he has to do stuff for the DEP. There is no time frame for the DEP to comment or do anything on that. So when Gino says, there may be 6 months, something like that, I think what you folks are asking really is to put them out of business.
Right.
That's what you want.
You are.
And I'm not sure
Can I
that.
speak when
Let's see
you're
what he has to
doing
say.
Yeah, I think we
No,
can.
hold on, no, but, so we have
discussed.
board discussion first. and
We have
then-
board discussion, and we will open up to the residents and you guys. So I did write to Mike Penny, because I saw the letter and it wasn't clear. So you have 21 days, and I said, so Mike, when do you guys act? Brad, once we have determined, based on the site plan review, that the operation is not maintaining the required setbacks, we will notify Mr. Howen and Vincent Muller verbally as soon as possible and follow up with a written correspondence. So as soon as they see that, and as soon as you have that plan, obviously you're going to need to move the berms, but you don't continue to operate within sight of that 250 feet.
Yeah, if I just, excuse me.
So did anybody else have any comments on that?
Well, I'd like to hear what he's.
Okay, well, that's before,
I'm hoping to have the engineer within the next 2 or 3 days. He's going to measure off the wells, determine a line, and if we don't have enough room to operate, then I'm not going to operate and try to do it and work around the line. Because if there's not enough physical space, I have to do something else, you know what I mean?
So, Mr. Chair, what I'd like to propose is that the operation ceases voluntarily till the engineer comes in and determines the line. Once the line is determined, I'd like to meet with Mr. Halloran as a client and read him the facts of life about what I've heard today. And
Yeah.
I'm very sympathetic to the fact that homeowners' values and homeowners' health is of primary importance here, over and above whatever profit is being made from this operation, which, by the way, is not significant enough for all of you to suffer from what I've heard from my clients so far.
Yeah.
So I'm very moved by the neighbors and by their comments. I would like the ability to ask you to put us on the very next agenda We'll cease operation till then. I'm pretty certain that any cessation of operation that you vote on for 21 days or more puts the operation out of business de facto, because I think the operation needs to be moved if it's longer. So if you would
Well, how does a
please,
voluntary cessation differ
Yeah.
from a
let him have a
shut
voluntary.
down for 21 days, whether we
No,
tell you
I
to or
want it
you
in
decide to?
Right.
want
I'm
it
a
in
little
writing.
concerned about a voluntary
Put it
cessation.
in writing. I'm just saying, I want him to be able to see and be convinced that between the property line moving from his engineer and what he's heard today and what I'm going to tell him about the costs of trying to fight this battle,
Yeah,
I think he will be convinced.
So I'm not.
Vinnie, you have something to say?
Yeah. You know, after hearing everyone speak tonight, I am the operator of the site. And I feel bad, because what's important here is the neighbors and their enjoyment of their home and their kids. And I'm going to suggest, after hearing everyone tonight, I'm going to suggest to Richard that we end it. So what's the quickest, most efficient way
Yeah.
to end the composting operation?
Yeah, we can determine a
I think
line.
if you just shut it down for 21 days, you're creating more of a problem with odor. And what I mean by that is, if we don't interject oxygen into the pile, the odor's gonna be worse when you go and move the
It goes in
material.
right of-
I'm suggesting we come up with a plan to stop.
Yeah, and get it out as soon
Completely.
as possible, rather than try to wait.
And I don't wanna have him stuck with
All the material.
thousands of yards of rotting leaves that these neighbors are gonna have to endure for the next, I don't know how many years if I just pull out. I'm not gonna do that, because I have a reputation.
Well, just so you know, we have the ability to order all that stuff removed as well, so it's not
They will do it.
relying on your good graces to come back and do it, it'll be an order if we get to that point. So,
Now to
so
start.
here's my question though, I mean frankly, you know, I think everybody meant well, but we were promised that you wouldn't work on Saturdays. You were promised that you wouldn't disturb the berm, and you cut away a good 2/3 of that berm down at the end. I'm just pointing out the facts that sometimes the follow-through hasn't been there. And I don't see the difference frankly between us saying shutting down or you doing it voluntarily. The leaves don't know any different.
I'd still like to suggest we reach agreement, you can put in writing about ceasing the operation of composting, but leave open the ability to start shutting the site down, including coming back to your next meeting with a plan from the engineer that he's hiring to tell us how to shut it down properly, so you don't have rotting leaves on the site forever.
So frankly, actually, based on what was just said, it sounds like you want to just shut down the operation. So then, to me, then the next step is establishing the plan, including the end date of shutting down, and I can retract my motion for a temporary cessation, because it sounds like you're willing to just cease operations permanently.
Yeah.
That's different, and then to me, I'd retract that, although then I would like the formal plan in writing by our next meeting, which is the second Tuesday of June.
And the neighbors would get an exit strategy as well, right?
You'd be notified to come to the meeting and you'd see it. Yeah.
So here's my question, so is it agreed that you guys need to shut down this operation? Or is that discussion?
I can't speak for him because I don't own the land. I'm suggesting that, I'm telling Richard, because I rent there, okay? I'm telling him that I am no longer interested in doing any type of a composting operation there. That's what I'm telling him.
So do you think in the interim that we still need to turn the leaves to keep it aerobic?
I would highly suggest it.
Yeah, but then again, like there's some topsoil and some compost from the previous year that's already been screened. It's sitting there stockpiled. It gives off absolutely no odor. I mean, if you were to shut it down today and let that sit there for the next 3 weeks to a month, it's of no benefit. That material can be hauled off.
Okay, that's not compost, this wouldn't cover that any, your topsoil can go.
Yeah, okay.
So here's my suggestion, when's our next meeting, Shelley?
It's the 14th, no.
2 weeks.
Yeah, the 14th of June? No.
No, that's a
No,
weekend.
that's a weekend.
Because there's a Tuesday.
No, it's not actually, no, that's a Tuesday.
It is the
That
14th, right?
yeah,
There's a reason I know,
Oh,
it's a really silly reason.
14.
Yeah,
It's really-
there's a silly
What happened
reason
early,
I
too?
know that it was the
Birthday?
14th.
We only meet the second and
Need to
fourth,
take my
so
dog.
there's 5 Tuesdays in,
Okay, so we have the 14th of June, during which time we'd like to see limited activity on that place.
Well, that's what I've been doing.
Okay? You can turn it to keep aerobic, you can certainly take off any of the topsoil stuff that's not related to compost. And by the 14th of June, we would like to see a written exit strategy with timelines and what that will entail.
Could I request that?
The only problem I have with that,
Yep.
because it's a little bit like farming, and I do farming, it's weather dependent. I mean, he could say, I'm gonna shoot to have everything out of there in 40 days.
Well, I mean,
But
in
if
your
you get-
plan, you give yourself enough room to
If it
cover
rains,
that, you know.
let them work it out, what they
Yeah.
think is, I'd be
But
open
we're gonna
to-
want, it'll be out by this date, we want a discrete end date. Whether you
Yeah.
give yourself enough time to cover a couple of weeks of hurricane weather or something, that's,
Yeah,
that's
right.
fine. But we want a date in there that says, we're off, all the organic materials removed.
Yeah, and typically, our average climate, now I know there's seasonal and yearly variabilities, but typically, July and August are the driest months in this climate. So that can't be an excuse unless we have a wet summer, which is always a possibility. But, and I get, farming, I come from a farming family, I can get that can disrupt the best intents in your schedules. But typically, July and August are dry months, so it shouldn't be that huge of an impact unless it's a weird.
And I think the composting activity slows down quite a bit in summer, as we've seen from the odor reports as
So
well.
can I ask, so the meeting's the 14th, which is a Tuesday, can I ask that we have that draft plan by the previous Friday?
You don't give me a
So we can
drawdown.
review before, I mean,
You need to hear what he's saying.
can I ask that we have this draft plan by the previous Friday? The meeting's the 14th of June. So that proposed plan of shutting down and timing operations,
Do you need to consult for a minute?
I don't want to commit to something and then.
Not
back
have it
and say-
done, but have a plan for when it will get done.
Draft plan.
a draft
It's a
plan.
draft to
And
look
I'm
at what
asking
it is
for
you're
it.
gonna do.
I'm asking for it so I can review it and we can send it out to people the Friday before, as opposed to getting
Feel better.
your communication on the 14th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and now I don't have enough time to review it.
Yeah.
So we also have the discussion then, if you guys are moving towards ceasing and putting out an exit strategy, which is what this plan is, with dates and that sort of thing, giving yourself enough time for weather and that sort of thing. One, I think we can recant on the zoning thing, if that's the plan. And two, I think we need to communicate with DEP. There's no point in you going ahead and getting this if you're
Yeah.
working on an exit strategy. So I would like Shelley to be CC'd on correspondence to DEP, because you'll be indicating to them your intention of closing this within a certain period of time. Does that seem reasonable? Because you don't, why hire an engineer to figure out your distance from a well if you're not doing it?
By closing, you mean everything out of there.
And closing means everything out there, all the organic material on there.
No
Not
wood.
the compost, no, I don't, not barns or any of that stuff.
And the perimeter berm too.
What's on the perimeter berm? Is it just
That's
dirt?
nice privacy
No,
for
no,
me, I
that's-
like that.
it's-
Well, that was privacy largely for the
It's the
composting
really
thing.
stinky stuff.
No, no one likes to look at it.
I mean, that was the lesser of two evils, which is why that berm was
Without
there.
getting to
Yeah.
that, I'd like to see what's in it. I
Well,
understand what you're saying.
Part of the reason
What's in
that,
it too.
If it's just.
part of the reason the
privacy-
perimeter berm was there, it was a berm made out of composted materials and included glass clippings, which we ultimately decided shouldn't be included. So I will tell you straight out, this board is going to order that perimeter berm taken out if this is part of the exit strategy.
He at one time put a berm up for Concom, and I don't know if it has.
That's on the other side of the
Well,
property,
good
it's a different
privacy, it
thing.
keeps headlights from going into the neighborhood also.
Do you guys prefer headlights or the berm?
Why would there be
Okay,
like-
that answers that one. All right. So this board, I think, will be ordering that berm along the Colonial Drive be taken out, because that was originally composted material and associated with a compost site.
sunlight, a lot of morning.
So if you're taking the composting stuff out of there, that perimeter berm's gonna go. Now, it should be pretty well composted by now,
Yeah,
so,
but I mean, the extra work to remove it, if it's just sitting there, I mean, it should be able to sit there. If it's a berm of dirt on my property, I don't see where it's hurting anybody. And I understand it might not be pleasant to look at, but a lot of things aren't.
come have a seat,
pleasant to look
Brock,
at,
this
you
is,
know.
relatively interesting compared to what we usually talk about.
Why don't you go planting on it?
No, well, that's what I wanted, was put spruce trees.
No,
in,
no,
so that-
no, no. We don't, it has grass clippings in it. I don't want it there. Like,
It's still within our wellhead area, and
Like
it's still
it's
decomposing, and it will be
still
for a
within-
long, long
yeah.
time. It'll take a long time.
So since this is gonna come up, do we have, the board is hearing this, we have a disagreement on whether that perimeter berm needs to come out.
I'd have to see more about it. I mean, what they're saying, you know, if you got a farming operation and you're plowing grass into the soil for the next year and stuff like that, there's no difference.
But there's
And
like,
that
there
in
was
the
like,
burn. But you're
one year,
talking-
he had to go through and pick out plastic.
Peter, this
bags.
thing's 20 feet high right up against the property line.
You can't see the sun coming down because the berm's.
I look at it this way, you've done a giant step in doing the compost, getting rid of the
Right.
compost. You got a lot of agreement in there.
Why don't we save that for the next meeting? I will tell you straight out that I will be pushing to remove that berm as part of that.
And I'm gonna look at it. I haven't
Peter's
really
gonna look at
I
it.
haven't even.
And my rationale, and I think Peter needs to see it, one, it is very high. I mean, this isn't a runoff berm. This is, and it was composted material that was associated with the compost site.
Basically,
That was
tailings.
required to be put in and left there as a condition of the composting. I think it's clearly associated with the composting activity. But let's take a look at it. You guys can put your arguments together, but you're gonna be hard pressed to tell me that isn't part of the organic material associated with that compost site.
Also, Mr. Yap, if you would like to come onto my property, we abut,
Yeah.
any board member has an open invitation. If there are no cars in the driveway, you can walk right up our driveway, number
What's
9.
your address again?
9 Colonial Drive.
Second one up on the right from
The
Harvard.
last name is McLaughlin. You're welcome to walk right up around behind.
Yeah,
I
I'll
have
take
no
a look at it.
problem
I
with
have,
that. If there's a car in the driveway, I just ask you to knock on the front
Yeah.
door so that you
oh,
don't.
I would
freak me out.
anyways. I've been shot at before.
You don't have a
We have no
shotgun, do
guns. My son has a lot of fake guns, though, so.
3 Colonial Drive as
So-
well.
Okay, so we're gonna look for a draft plan. We will leave open the issue of that perimeter burn. Peter's gonna visit in the interim. You've seen it, Gino?
you? Yeah.
Okay, and we can clarify that at the next meeting when we talk about that draft plan.
So
Does
Brad,
that seem acceptable?
and do you need me to officially?
You need to pull your
recant?
motion off the
All right.
table.
Yeah. Put on a burner.
So I propose that I recant and pull my motion, and so it's no longer under consideration.
Second.
by the board.
Okay.
Hey, let me.
Sorry, I
finish.
get yelled at at work if I don't follow these rules.
I know what
so-
you're gonna say.
Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Thank you all.
And thank you guys for your goodwill.
Yeah.
I mean, this means so much. You have no idea how much this means.
Sherry, Richard, if you have questions about this or need input through any of us, contact Shelley or me directly, and we'd be happy to at least, I mean, I'm sure you have an idea, but if you hit a crossroad and say, what do you think we ought to do here? We're happy to provide that input as we go along.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming.
What part of Ireland are you from? Cork. Cork. Yeah, I got pseudo-son-in-law, he's from down in Limerick.
Oh,
He said,
I'd like to take, we need a motion to adjourn.
I would like the motion that we adjourn the meeting.
You're welcome, because we're going to the pub. so.
We all done, wait a minute. You nothing else on the agenda?
I just motioned to adjourn.
Yeah, I heard
There's
you.
nothing else, no other business?
No.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ah, jeez.
Don't sell the house.